Chinese billionaire CEO assaults black waitress seconds later, his power vanishes. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. You need to watch where you're going. The words cut through the dining room like a knife dragged across porcelain, sharp, deliberate, impossible to ignore. The restaurant was all glass and linen, midday light spilling across white tablecloths and polished cutlery. Power lunches hummed in low tones. Jackets tailored to silence. Watches that glinted without trying. At the center aisle, a black waitress in a crisp white shirt and red vest steadied a tray of wine glasses, her posture trained to calm, her steps measured to the inch. A hand closed around her wrist. Not a stumble. Not an accident. A grip. The man who held her wore a navy suit so perfectly fitted it looked poured on. His hair was silver at the temples, his smile practiced and thin. A Chinese billionaire CEO. Everyone here knew the face, the fortune, the rules bending wherever he stood. His fingers tightened, stopping her mid-stride. The glasses on her tray chimed, a fragile warning. I said watch it, he repeated, louder now, eyes flicking to the people around them. You almost ruined my lunch. A few heads turned. A chair scraped. Someone laughed soft, uncertain, approving. This was how rooms like this decided what was acceptable. She didn't pull away. Not yet. Her eyes met his, steady and unreadable. The red of her vest caught the light, the wine in the glasses trembled, a thin ripple traveling to the rim. The CEO leaned closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a joke meant only for those who mattered. Do you know how much this table costs per minute? He said. Relax. You're replaceable. A manager hovered at the edge of the aisle, hands clasped, calculating. The other diners returned to their conversations, reassured by the suit, the watch, the money. Phones stayed down for now. This was normal. This was power being power. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Ariana. The name sat in the air like a held breath. Ariana's gaze shifted not to the manager, not to the crowd but to the man's hand on her wrist. She noticed the pressure, the impatience. She noticed how easily he assumed her silence meant permission. Her grip on the tray adjusted by a fraction of an inch, a server's reflex hiding something colder underneath. Sir, she said, calm as poured water, please let go. The CEO smiled, a flash meant to end the moment on his terms. Careful, he replied. You don't want to make a scene. That was when the room began to feel different. Not louder. Quieter. The kind of quiet that arrives when something breaks without making a sound. Ariana straightened, the tray perfectly level. The glasses stopped chiming. Around them, the light looked harsher, edges sharper. The CEO's hand lingered a second too long, confident in the weight of his name. No one moved to stop him. No one knew who they were really watching. And in that narrow aisle, between linen and glass, with the billionaire's grip tightening and a waitress standing still, the balance of the room tipped just enough for the fall to begin. The CEO finally released her wrist. Not because he felt resistance, because he felt watched. Ariana's hand returned to the stem of the tray, fingers steady, the faint imprint of his grip already fading beneath her cuff. She didn't step back. She didn't apologize. She simply stood there, occupying the narrow aisle as if it belonged to her. The glasses were still. The wine no longer trembled. Around them, the room recalibrated. A man at the corner table cleared his throat and leaned toward his companion. "That's awkward," he murmured, half smiling, "the way people do when cruelty doesn't touch them directly." Another diner lifted his phone, then thought better of it and set it face down beside his plate. A woman in pearls watched with open curiosity, eyes flicking between the suit and the vest, already deciding which side would age better. The manager took a step forward, then stopped. He glanced at the CEO's watch, the cufflinks, the quiet authority that money wore so easily. His jaw tightened. This was a calculation, not a moral pause. He chose the safer path and stayed silent. The CEO straightened his jacket and exhaled, satisfied. "See," he said lightly, spreading his hands as if restoring order. "No harm done." Ariana didn't answer. She pivoted just enough to resume her route, the tray gliding forward. The CEO watched her pass, his smile lingering, a victory he assumed would hold. It didn't. A ripple moved through the table, subtle, but real. The conversations that resumed did so at a lower volume. Forks clinked with less confidence. People sensed a misstep had been made, even if they couldn't name it yet. At the service station near the back, the head server froze when he saw Ariana's face. Not fear recognition. His eyes flicked to the CEO, then back to her. He swallowed and busied himself with menus, hands suddenly unsteady. Ariana placed the glasses at the far table with a soft precision. Red wine caught the light, a clean line against white linen. She nodded once to the guests, professional, unreadable, then turned back toward the aisle. The CEO had reclaimed his seat. He leaned into his companions, voice lowered, confident. "You give people an inch," he said, chuckling, "they think they deserve the table." A laugh answered him, quick, obliging. Another followed. The room took the cue. Normalcy was being reassembled, piece by piece. Ariana paused beside the host stand. She looked across the dining room, not at the CEO, but at the people watching him. The ones who laughed. The ones who didn't. The ones who looked away. Her phone vibrated once in her pocket. She didn't check it. Instead, she adjusted her vest, smoothed the crease at her sleeve, and took a breath so measured it barely moved her shoulders. The kind of breath taken by someone who knew time was no longer working against her. Behind the bar, a bartender leaned toward a colleague. "Something's off," he whispered. At the CEO's table, the laughter softened again, the edge dulling. He felt it, a thinning of the air, a quiet shift he couldn't explain. He glanced up, searching the room for affirmation. Ariana met his eyes. Not with anger. Not with defiance. With certainty. The moment passed. Plates arrived. Menus opened. The room pretended it had chosen peace. But beneath the linen and glass, the choice had already been made. The CEO settled into his chair as if the interruption had been a minor inconvenience, already shrinking in his mind. He loosened his cuff, glanced at his phone, and allowed the room to orbit him again. This was familiar terrain. Rooms always did. His name carried weight here. It bent posture, softened voices, opened doors that stayed closed to others. He had built an empire on that certainty, on the understanding that money didn't just buy comfort, it bought permission. Permission to interrupt. To correct. To touch. To decide who belonged. He leaned back, crossing one leg over the other, and surveyed the dining room with the calm ownership of a man used to being accommodated. The city had learned him well. Deals had been signed across tables like this one. Apologies delivered by people who needed him more than he needed them. This restaurant, like many others, knew the rhythm: keep him pleased, keep him spending. "Service is slipping," he said to his companions, not bothering to lower his voice. "You let standards drop once, they drop everywhere." A nod. A murmured agreement. The table closed ranks around him, an instinctive defense of hierarchy. In his mind, the waitress was already gone, filed away with other brief inconveniences. A face without a future. He didn't consider her reaction, or the way she'd met his eyes. Those details didn't register. People like her didn't linger in his thoughts. They passed through his day like furniture. He lifted his glass and gestured for more wine, confident the request would travel ahead of him. When it didn't arrive immediately, irritation flickered. He checked his watch. Time, after all, was the one thing he valued more than money. "I have a call in 20 minutes, he said. "Make sure this moves." Across the room, a server hesitated before approaching his table. The manager noticed and intervened, taking the order himself, his smile stretched tight. "Of course, sir," he said. "Right away." The CEO nodded, satisfied. Control restored. What he didn't see was the way conversations nearby had changed. The way eyes followed the manager, not him. The way a woman 2 tables over whispered something to her partner and stopped laughing altogether. He missed the subtle recalibration, the small social tells that signaled a shift. His phone buzzed. A message from an assistant, then another. He glanced down, scanning quickly, his expression unchanged. He typed a brief reply and set the phone aside, already confident the machine he commanded would keep running without his attention. This was the danger of his certainty. It had insulated him from consequences for too long. He raised his glass again, speaking as if delivering a lesson. "People mistake tolerance for weakness," he said. "They forget who sets the rules." At the service station, Ariana listened without turning. She had returned to her position, posture composed, movements efficient. From here, she could see the entire room, the angles, the exits, the way attention pooled and drained. She heard him clearly. The words didn't anger her. They clarified. The CEO laughed softly, pleased with himself. The sound carried, then fell flat, unanswered. He frowned, sensing something wasn't landing the way it should. He scanned the room for affirmation and found only neutrality. Polite faces. Controlled silence. He dismissed the feeling. Rooms wavered sometimes. They always corrected. He didn't know that the rules he spoke of were already being rewritten quietly, methodically by the one person he had decided didn't matter. And as his phone vibrated again, longer this time, he ignored it, convinced of a truth that had always protected him. Power stayed where it was claimed. He would learn, very soon, how wrong that assumption was. Ariana moved through the restaurant with the practiced rhythm of someone who understood flow, how spaces breathed, how people shifted when they believed no one important was watching. She collected empty plates, replaced cutlery, nodded at requests she had already anticipated. To anyone paying casual attention, she was exactly what her uniform suggested. But there were details that didn't fit. Her posture never collapsed, even when the room grew heavy. Her movements were efficient without being hurried, deliberate without being stiff. When a guest spoke, she listened fully, then decided. Not every request received the same weight. Not every tone earned a response. At the service station, she paused, setting a tray down with a precision that bordered on ritual. Her fingers adjusted a napkin by a millimeter. Her eyes lifted not to the dining room, but to the reflection in the mirrored wall behind the bar. She took in the room at once. The CEO's table. The manager's tension. The diners who had laughed and the ones who hadn't. The cameras still tucked away, waiting for permission to come out. She catalogued it all without judgment. Information, not emotion. A young server approached her, lowering his voice. "Are you okay?" he asked, glancing nervously toward the center tables. Ariana met his eyes and gave a small nod. "I'm fine," she said. It wasn't reassurance. It was fact. The server hesitated, then left, unsettled by the certainty in her tone. At the bar, the bartender watched her from the corner of his eye. He'd been here long enough to recognize people who didn't belong to the usual hierarchy. People who carried themselves as if the room adjusted to them, not the other way around. Ariana moved like that. Not demanding attention. Commanding space. Her phone vibrated again. This time, she checked it. One message. No name attached. Just a symbol she recognized and a single line beneath it. Confirmed. She slipped the phone back into her pocket without changing expression. No rush. No smile. Whatever had just aligned was expected. Prepared for. Across the room, the CEO spoke again, louder now, his confidence needing reinforcement. Ariana didn't turn. She didn't need to. His voice had already lost its edge, dulled by something he couldn't see. The manager finally approached her, careful to keep his voice neutral. "Everything all right back here?" he asked. Ariana looked at him not unkindly. "Yes," she said. "But it will need your attention soon." He blinked. "Excuse me." She didn't explain. She picked up her tray and stepped past him, leaving the words where they were. The manager watched her go, a chill creeping in that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. As she crossed the dining room again, the CEO's gaze found her. Their eyes met briefly. He searched her face for something: defiance, embarrassment, apology. He found none of it. What he saw instead unsettled him. Not resistance. Recognition. As if she knew him better than he knew himself. Ariana reached the far end of the room and stopped. She set the tray down, folded her hands lightly in front of her, and waited. Not for orders. Not for permission. For timing. The restaurant continued its performance, plates arriving, wine poured, conversations resuming. On the surface, nothing had changed. But beneath it, currents shifted. Decisions had been made. Lines had been crossed. And the woman they believed was invisible stood calmly at the center of it all, already holding the next move. The timing arrived quietly. It always did. Ariana was mid-step when the CEO's chair scraped back again, sharp, impatient. He stood this time, irritation finally outweighing decorum. The manager stiffened, already moving, but too slowly. The moment had chosen its owner. "You," the CEO said, pointing, his voice carrying just far enough. "Come here." Ariana stopped. Not abruptly. Not defiantly. She turned with the calm of someone answering a door they expected to be knocked on. "Yes, sir," she asked. The word "sir" landed like a mirror held too close. He stepped toward her, closing the distance without asking. His tone dropped, private but poisonous. "You think standing there like that fixes anything," he said. "You embarrassed me." A few diners leaned back in their chairs, sensing gravity. Others leaned in. Phones emerged this time without hesitation. Ariana didn't move. "Return the bottle," he continued. "And after that, get someone else to serve us. Someone who understands their place." There it was. The line, cleanly drawn. Ariana glanced at the table. The half-finished glasses. The white linen unblemished still. She looked back at him, eyes steady. "I'm afraid that won't be necessary," she said. The CEO laughed once, sharp and incredulous. "Necessary?" He shook his head. "Listen carefully. I don't ask twice." He reached out again. Not as firmly this time. Not to grab. To guide. His fingers brushed her forearm, casual, dismissive, claiming ownership of the moment. That was the mistake. Ariana stepped back, a single measured pace, creating space where he expected compliance. The contact broke. The room inhaled. "Sir," she said, Louder now, not raised, just clear, do not touch me. Silence snapped into place. The manager froze halfway between them. A fork clattered somewhere near the windows and wasn't picked up. Every eye locked onto the narrow space Ariana had carved with one step. The CEO's smile hardened. "You're making this very difficult," he said. "I'm trying to be generous." Ariana's voice didn't change. "Generosity doesn't look like that." He glanced around, searching for the room to rescue him, to laugh, to deflect, to smooth this over the way it always had. It didn't. The laughter was gone. The air had turned brittle. "Security," he said, testing the word. "Are we really doing this?" The manager opened his mouth. "Closed it?" Ariana reached into her pocket. Not hurried. Not dramatic. She took out her phone. The CEO scoffed. "Recording me now? That's a bad idea." She didn't answer. She tapped the screen once. Then again. A soft chime confirmation. Across the room, her phone buzzed immediately in response. Ariana looked at the screen for half a second. Then she looked up at him. "This is where it stops," she said. The CEO felt it then, a subtle, unwelcome sensation. Not fear. Displacement. Like standing on a floor that had shifted an inch without warning. "What is?" he asked. She slipped the phone back into her pocket. "Everything you think is holding." The manager's phone vibrated. He glanced down, color draining from his face. At the CEO's table, one of his companions checked his own screen and went very still. The CEO laughed again, but it didn't land. "Enough," he said. "I'm done with this." He turned to sit. He didn't know that the moment he'd crossed the casual touch, the public dismissal had already triggered something irreversible. Ariana remained where she was, composed, unyielding. The room waited. And for the first time in a very long career, the CEO had the uneasy sense that whatever came next would not be decided by him. The change didn't announce itself. It arrived the way real disasters did, quiet, procedural, undeniable. The manager's phone vibrated again. He looked down, then up, then down once more, as if the screen might correct itself if given time. His mouth opened. No sound came out. He stepped back from the CEO's table, hands suddenly unsure of where to rest. "Is there a problem?" the CEO asked, irritation sharpening his words. No one answered him. At the table, one of his companions stared at his phone, thumb frozen mid-scroll. Another shifted in his chair, the color draining from his face as a notification stacked on top of another. The laughter that had once protected them was gone now, replaced by the faint hum of panic trying not to be seen. The CEO frowned and finally picked up his own phone. No signal issue. No dead battery. Just messages. Too many. All at once. He read the first. Then the second. His jaw tightened, a reflex born of decades spent refusing surprise. He refreshed the screen. The same alert stared back at him, sterile and unforgiving. "Account access temporarily suspended." He scoffed under his breath and tapped again, harder this time. "This is a mistake," he said, more to the table than the room. "Someone fix this." Another buzz. A call, this time from his assistant. He answered it sharply. "What is going on?" Silence on the other end, followed by breathing controlled, professional, frightened. "Sir," she said, "we're experiencing disruptions. Multiple ones." "What kind of disruptions?" A pause. "Too long." "Legal," she said. "Financial. Partners are pulling back." "The board." "Impossible," he snapped. "I didn't authorize anything." "I know," she said. "But the authorization didn't come from you." The word didn't landed wrong. Across the room, Ariana stood exactly where she had been, hands folded, posture unchanged. The noise of the restaurant had thinned to a background blur. All attention funneled toward the fracture spreading outward from one table. The CEO lowered his voice. Who did it? Another pause. Then, carefully, the controlling interest. He laughed once, harsh. That's me. No, sir, the assistant said. It isn't. The CEO's eyes lifted from his phone and locked onto Ariana. The realization didn't explode. It sank. Slowly. Completely. Around him, the room adjusted again, this time without him. Diners leaned back, distance forming. Phones came out freely now, no longer worried about permission. The manager's face had gone pale, his body angled subtly away from the CEO, toward Ariana. What did you do? The CEO demanded. Ariana didn't answer immediately. She didn't need to. The answer was unfolding in real time. Another alert hit his screen. Merger talks suspended. Effective immediately. His hand tightened around the phone. This is insane, he said. You don't have that kind of reach. Ariana finally spoke. Her voice was level, unhurried. I have exactly that kind, she said. You just never thought to ask. The CEO stood, chair knocking backward, the sound too loud in the hush that followed. For the first time, the room didn't make space for him. It watched. What are you? He asked. Ariana met his gaze not triumphantly, not cruelly. With clarity. Someone who decides, she said. And someone you touched without permission. The manager's phone buzzed again. He swallowed hard. Sir, he said to the CEO, voice barely steady, we're going to need you to step outside. The CEO looked around, searching for an ally, a laugh, a correction. There were none. What he felt then wasn't rage. It was absence. The sudden, vertiginous absence of power slipping away without ceremony, without negotiation, leaving him standing in a room that no longer recognized his name. The room didn't rush to fill the silence. It let it stand. The CEO remained upright, but something essential had already given way. His shoulders were squared out of habit, his chin lifted by muscle memory alone. The posture of command without the substance to support it. This is temporary, he said, voice tight, forcing a smile that no longer convinced anyone. Miscommunication happens. No one responded. At his table, a man who'd laughed earlier now avoided eye contact, busying himself with a napkin that didn't need folding. Another guest slid his chair back a few inches, subtle, but unmistakable. Distance was being created, socially and physically. The manager stepped closer, careful, professional, newly emboldened. Sir, he said again, quieter now, we need to resolve this away from the dining room. The CEO looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. You work for me, he said. The manager shook his head. Just once. Not anymore. That did it? A murmur moved through the room, no longer contained. Phones rose openly now, lenses unashamed. Someone whispered, is this real? Another voice answered, it is now. The CEO reached for his phone again, fingers less steady this time. He dialed. It went to voicemail. He tried another number. Then another. Each unanswered ring landed heavier than the last. Across the aisle, Ariana stood still. She wasn't watching him fall. She was watching the room, how quickly it learned. How fast loyalty shifted when gravity changed direction. This was the part people never talked about. Collapse wasn't loud. It was isolating. Move, the CEO snapped, stepping toward the exit, then stopping short as the path failed to clear. No one blocked him intentionally. They just didn't move. For the first time, he had to navigate around other people. His foot caught the edge of a chair leg. He stumbled, not dramatically, not fully, but enough. Enough for the illusion to crack. A hand shot out to steady himself and found nothing willing. A collective intake of breath followed. He recovered, barely, straightening with effort. His face flushed, anger and fear colliding without resolution. "This isn't over," he said, to no one in particular. Ariana finally stepped forward, just enough to be heard. "It is," she said calmly. "Here." The words weren't cruel. They were precise. Security appeared at the edge of the room, not summoned by him this time. They spoke quietly to the manager, who nodded once. A decision made without ceremony. "Sir," one of them said, respectful but firm, "we'll escort you out." The CEO stared at them, then at Ariana. Something like disbelief flickered across his face. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Whatever argument he'd rehearsed his whole life didn't apply here. As he was guided toward the door, the room parted, not in deference, but in relief. The sound of chairs moving returned. Conversations resumed in cautious fragments. At the threshold, he glanced back one last time. Ariana met his eyes. There was no triumph there. Only finality. And when the door closed behind him, the dining room exhaled, the collapse complete, witnessed by everyone who had once laughed and chosen the wrong side. The door closed softly behind him. Not a slam. Not a spectacle. Just a quiet seal that marked the end of his authority in that room. For several seconds, no one spoke. The restaurant existed in a strange in-between, half stunned, half relieved. Then the sound returned in layers. A chair scraping back. A breath released. Someone clearing a throat as if testing whether the world still worked. Phones lit up everywhere. Not furtively this time. Openly. Messages flew faster than explanations could keep up with. Photos were sent. Short videos uploaded. Captions written with shaking thumbs. The story began to move, untethered from the room that had birthed it. At the host stand, the manager wiped his hands on his jacket, unaware he was doing it. He looked at Ariana, uncertainty etched deep now. "Ms." he began, then stopped. He didn't know what to call her. Ariana turned to him. "You handled it," she said simply. He nodded, grateful for the absolution he hadn't known he needed. At the bar, a woman leaned toward her companion. "Did you see his face?" she whispered. "He had no idea." Her companion shook his head. "They never do." Across the dining room, conversations shifted, not back to business, but to meaning. People spoke more carefully now. Voices carried a new caution, as if the room itself had learned something and demanded it be respected. Ariana moved toward the service station and removed her vest. Folded it neatly. Placed it on the counter with deliberate care. The uniform had done its job. The manager watched, then finally asked the question everyone else was too afraid to voice. "Are we, all right?" Ariana met his eyes. "Yes," she said. "You are." Her phone buzzed again. Then again. She glanced at the screen once. Messages stacked in clean lines, legal confirmations, press inquiries, board updates. The machinery of consequence turning smoothly, efficiently, without drama. She typed a single reply and put the phone away. Near the window, a man who had laughed earlier stared at his untouched plate. The laughter felt distant now, something reckless he couldn't reclaim. He shifted uncomfortably, aware that he'd been measured and found wanting. Ariana walked toward the exit, unhurried. As she passed tables, eyes followed her with a new understanding. Not admiration. Not fear. Respect. Outside, the city continued on, unaware of the small but permanent recalibration that had just occurred inside a glass-walled restaurant. Empires didn't always fall with noise. Sometimes they slipped quietly out the side door, escorted by strangers. Ariana paused just before leaving, taking in the room one last time. Then she stepped out into the afternoon light, the aftermath settling behind her, inevitable, irreversible, and entirely earned. By the time evening settled over the city, the story had already outrun the place where it began. Headlines were forming. Lawyers were drafting. Boards were convening emergency calls in rooms far quieter than the restaurant had been. The machinery of consequence did not sleep, it recalculated. Ariana stood at the window of a car moving smoothly through traffic, the city lights reflecting faintly across the glass. Her phone rested beside her, face down. Everything that needed to happen was already in motion. There was no satisfaction in it. No adrenaline left to spend. Just alignment. Across town, the CEO sat alone, jacket draped over the back of a chair he no longer owned. Calls went unanswered. Messages arrived stripped of warmth, heavy with distance. He replayed the moment again and again, the touch he hadn't thought twice about, the room that hadn't laughed when it was supposed to. He had mistaken access for authority. Ariana thought of the restaurant not with anger, but clarity. Of the people who had laughed, the ones who had looked away, the few who had noticed too late. Power, she knew, didn't announce itself with volume. It revealed itself through restraint. The uniform she'd worn that afternoon lay folded on the seat beside her. A costume, useful for a moment. She hadn't worn it to deceive. She'd worn it to observe. To measure how people behaved when they believed no one important was watching. The car slowed. Stopped. Ariana stepped out into the quiet, the air cool against her skin. Somewhere behind her, consequences continued to unfold, contracts unwinding, reputations recalibrated, doors quietly closing. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't demanded apologies. She hadn't needed to. Dignity, she knew, didn't require permission. And power, real power, didn't need to prove itself by taking from others. It waited. It remembered. And when it moved cleanly. Inside the restaurant, chairs would be reset. Tables wiped down. The day's drama reduced to a story told in fragments. But the lesson would remain, embedded in the room's memory, in the way voices softened when respect was uncertain. Ariana walked forward, unburdened. Somewhere, someone would call what happened justice. Someone else would call it consequences. Both would be right. What mattered was simpler than either word. Touch without respect always costs more than anyone expects. And power, once exposed, never returns to the hands that abused it.